by part of Turkey's armed forces.
Last year, the New York Times described the conflict in the Nuba Mountains as the worst atrocity you've never heard of. South Sudan seceded from the north in 2011, ending decades of conflict. But for the people of the Nuba Mountains who were left in Sudan when the South separated, the story is far from over. The government of President Omar al-Bashir is still at war with the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, a rebel group that was aligned with the South during the Civil War. The rebels hold a lot of ground in those mountains, but the fighting goes on and it's taking a serious toll on civilians. Getting to the story, however, is a challenge for reporters. It's inaccessible during the rainy season, and the rest of the time, according to our sources, the government in Khartoum controls who gets in and therefore controls much of the narrative. The fight back in this information war comes from within. A news organization called Ayin, comprised of citizen journalists on the ground, exiled journalists on the outside, and mobile cinemas across the country, is pushing back against the version of the story that's coming out of the capital. The Listening Post's Nick Muirhead now from Khartoum on Sudan's forgotten war.
The Nuba Mountains in South Kordofan, Sudan, is a part of the world seldom seen in news reports. In 2011, fighting broke out between the army and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, the SPLM-N, a rebel group that had fought alongside the South in Sudan's civil war. Just how many civilians this conflict has killed or displaced is impossible to verify. But for years now, aid organizations have been warning of a humanitarian crisis in South Kordofan. The government of President Omar al-Bashir has placed tight restrictions on how the fighting is covered. Journalists struggle to get in, so people living in the Nuba Mountains are trying to get their story out. People like Joseph Nyetu. In his mid-20s, Nyetu has lived his entire life surrounded by conflict. But instead of picking up a gun, he picked up a camera.
It was very much important for me because, many things were done and there was no any evidence that was given to the people outside to see what's happening in South Kordofan and especially Nuba Mountains. So I pick up these things for the people outside to see the evidence of what is happening in Nuba.
Journalists have never been allowed to cover the battlefield where military operations were underway. The government does not allow it under the pretext that it will jeopardize national security. So journalism is dictated to by the official narrative of Sudan's armed forces. And it's very difficult to verify their version of events because the war prohibits you from communicating with the other side in the fighting.
Since this government came into power in 1989, it has had a chokehold on the media and it pumps propaganda through all its media outlets. Now they even have an electronic unit to counter opposing narratives online, and they put people who speak up and who do critical journalism in the realm of enemy of the state.
That's why this journalist requested that we conceal his identity. He works for a news organization called Ayin that focuses almost exclusively on covering the conflict in the Nuba Mountains. The organization says it gets its funding from charitable donations and wants to use factual information to build bridges between communities. Ayin uses a team of reporters on the ground to newsgather, and from there, the footage makes its journey out through a network of couriers. The footage is then smuggled out of the country to this production office where around a dozen Sudanese journalists are working in exile. For security reasons, they've asked me not to disclose the location. But that's just half of the journey, because once it gets here, it's edited and then sent back to its target audience in Sudan. Because the journalists working at Ayin say, the change they seek will not come from the outside, but from within, so their target audience is local. The group has teamed up with Hajooj Kuka, a prominent Sudanese filmmaker. And together they screen films shot in the Nuba Mountains across Sudan using mobile cinemas. The goal, they say, is to get the country talking.
Mobile cinema is a group of, right now, three young people, and they walk for very long distances with this backpack and an audio, and they basically set up in the middle of a village, and then they play a film for them. And after the film, they start to have a discussion, like, let's discuss the film and let's talk about what was happening.
People want to see what's going on, but they're not getting it from the media outlets in Khartoum. So we're reaching out to different communities just through a projector and a screen, trying to tell them that this is exactly what your government doesn't want you to see. But it's very difficult to try and show our material in public without security showing up at the door.
The counter-narratives presented in the Ayin films push back against the mass media messaging coming out of Khartoum, where journalists almost unfailingly echo the government line. A major point of contention is which side bears greater responsibility for civilian casualties. The rebels say that the Sudanese army's incessant bombing is to blame. The government in Khartoum disagrees.
We believe that the SPLMN is keeping the citizens of those areas as human shields. The government, whenever attack or whenever bombard, they are targeting SPLMN army. This question should be raised for those people. Why they are keeping citizens within them? They are the one who should be asked about the casualties in the civilians, not the government.
In May, 6 children were killed during the bombing of an area called Hajooj County near the Nuba Mountains. Looking through the coverage in Khartoum, I came across an op-ed in Sudan Vision, an English-language daily. The writer said that rebel troop mobilization triggered the attack, and if children were killed, it was likely that they were being used as human shields. But the writer didn't stop there. He detailed an elaborate plot between the SPLMN and a nameless Jewish organization who were using the deaths as a distraction in order to conceal their illicit activities in the region. The article didn't stack up, so I met with the writer, MUSTAFA Rasheed, the editor of Sudan Vision. How did you come about that information? How were you able to report that?
I got this information from a certain newspaper that said that there were unknown planes landing in the area and mining gold and other minerals, and that they were providing weapons to the rebels. Later, this information was also published by the armed forces.
That's the version coming from a journalist in Khartoum. This is how it was reported by journalists on the ground.
So we documented this event. It was really sad. There's 6 of them, ranging in age between 4 years old and 12 years old. So we edited the video, put it out there for the Sudanese community. There's the campaign. They decided they're gonna have this day where they're gonna come together and people would just say a word about the 6 that are dead. So a fighter jet came again during that day. There was bombing, 1 more kid got killed.
If truth is the first casualty of war, then who do you believe in a country that has been in a state of conflict for nearly 60 years? That is for news consumers in Sudan to discern, and for the Ayin filmmakers in the Nuba Mountains. As this round of fighting enters another year, so does their fight to tell the story.
Most of the time we say things, people never believe them. If I say, hey, today there was a bombing in South Kordofan, no one will believe that because there's no any evidence. But when I walk on it with my own camera and bring out the reality about the bombing, it sounds much than my words I speak. It's like it gives out the real kind of action that is taking place in South Kordofan.
We're kind of waving a red flag to people in Sudan, telling them that this chokehold on the country and the media is going to get tighter. It's extremely urgent that all of us, citizens and journalists, reflect what's going on and speak up about it. Because if you're silent about injustice, then you're an accomplice to injustice.